Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool, and I'm going to do a series on Snap-on, and not necessarily particular Snap-on tools, but more the essence or spirit or maybe controversy over Snap-on. I'm like you probably and quick to click on the YouTube videos about why I hate Snap-on or the top 10 reasons to buy it or to not buy it or why it's awful. So what I'm going to do is address some of the issues that lead people to make Snap-on be, kind of that target, that thing that we can love or hate or point at, and everybody has an opinion. And I tried to address it more in an academic way. So what I'm going to do is look at 5 different ways that I think Snap-on both attracts attention, deserves attention, and then also may be the victim of that attention. So number one, what I'm going to call curse of the leader. Snap-on, of course, has that essence. It's got that panache. People recognize it if they're in the know. And one of the things that Snap-on does is it markets itself as the choice of the professionals. And what it's doing is saying, we are number one. We are the one that you should look at if you want to judge a mechanic by his tools, or that you want to actually say that there is a best tool. We are it. And just simply by saying that makes them a target. They are the leader according to Snap-on, according to themselves, which means there is automatically a target on their back. So you're not going to get a lot of traction by complaining about Matco or complaining about Cornwell. But if you talk about Snap-on, people listen. So that's number one. Number two is a statistical situation called regression to the mean. And what that means is that any particular situation or person, or talent, or a tool in this case, that starts out being for various reasons, whether it's fit, finish, price, capability, happens to also drift towards normal in the high end, meaning once Snap-on is surrounded by Mac and Matco and Cornwell, in any other high, if it's screwdrivers, PB Swiss, Wera, it could actually be, something in a particular space that only makes a certain size or certain type of tool. What happens is if you compare Snap-on to that, Snap-on seems average. And regression to the mean is average, and what it means is as you move higher and higher and higher and higher in levels, you surround yourself with equivalence, and that means you retain that average. So Snap-on, while compared to Craftsman or Ace Professional or Husky or any of the other brands of basic tools, rises above it. But when you put it in the kind of the same boat in comparison with some of the other high-end, maybe tool truck tools or very specific tools, even foreign tools, it basically becomes average. So we get angry when supposedly our top end becomes average, and then we blame it. It's kind of sometimes what you feel with the iPhone or with Apple products. They can be really amazing. You feel obligated once you've bought into that ecosystem to continue. But then all of a sudden you notice something else that seems very similar. And all of a sudden your super high-end tool becomes average. It doesn't mean it's any less. It just means that it's possible to make comparables. And then you feel angry or cheated, or maybe even you just feel like you were duped, that maybe there were other things you should have looked at. But in reality, regression to the mean, or it's also known as the Heisman curse, is something that high-end things, abilities, talents, etc., always run into. It's the kid who scored straight A's all through high school, goes to a high-end college, and all of a sudden he's totally average and he feels uncomfortable. So that's what can happen with Snap-on, is if you start getting into that rarefied air of high-end tools, you start becoming average. Another thing is their business model. Now, probably every new tech or mechanic or kid who comes out of some community college and wants to, excel at twisting nuts and turning wrenches and, rounding bolts, he's going to get into Snap-on. And Snap-on just carries with it that feeling that you must be worth something. It's a purpose. It's an identity. But the problem with that is they also have a business model that has nothing to do with the quality of their hand tools. It's simply riding on the back of the quality. And that is that you can get into debt, or you can actually end up, ruining your career, I guess, if you make that leap to the Snap-on truck and end up not doing well and losing a fortune. Basically there's a business model behind a lot of the Snap-on tools. That isn't anything to do with the quality, but it is something that people judge the tools with, and it's unfortunate. It'd be like if you looked at your, say in my case, the Toyota Tacoma, but then I started to worry, are they pushing, some aspect of the Prius or some other part of their, Land Cruiser line that just doesn't justify what they're saying? Does that affect something with my Tacoma? No, but it's part of the whole system. So I think the business model, sometimes the payments, the credit, the truck, everything else can become part of the way we judge the tools, and in reality it has nothing to do with the operation of the tools. Next one is, I think there's a big difference between the electric side of Snap-on. In this case, best I've got is light, because I use all Milwaukee battery powered tools, but sometimes the scanners and the electrical tools overshadow a lot of the hand tools, the hardcore solid steel hand tools. And when that happens, what ends up is that people start to judge the hand tools by the performance or the limitations or the excessive cost of the electronics. And obviously all of the electronics are going to have a short shelf life. I did a video on vintage tools versus old tools versus heirloom tools. None of these electronic tools are going to fit into any of those categories. They're all going to be long dead or broken before they become any kind of heirloom or vintage or old tool. They'll be in the landfill or hopefully recycled because of their batteries and their rare earth metals. But the good solid stuff, or even especially the no moving parts, there's no reason this shouldn't last centuries. And in reality, sometimes the electronic tools the essence of that starts to drift over everything else, when in fact that's not called for. The electronic stuff is totally separate, any more than you'd think of a vintage iPhone. It's like, cool, maybe it's a novelty, maybe if you're into that stuff you'd have it in your man cave, but otherwise it is 100% useless. Not so with the steel. Next one just simply has to do with the branding of Snap-on. Snap-on has spent an enormous amount of effort and care and money branding themselves. Now, this isn't the traditional branding or imprinting in younger age like the tobacco company or something. Instead, what this is a feeling of confidence with a brand name. Anything that says Snap-on has a value. Anything at all. There is no choice in the matter. Doesn't matter what it is. That can sometimes be one of the problems. But in essence, you feel that just simply the Snap-on is a guarantee. And by having that guarantee, you feel comfortable with it. You feel okay with it. And so that makes it a target, because then people will say, well, just because it's Snap-on doesn't mean it's the best. True. But there is a benefit to something saying Snap-on. And by saying Snap-on, we have that little bit of extra confidence that it'll either perform, or that we can sell it, or that it has value, that it has some sort of performance, whether we need it or not, that is intrinsic. And Snap-on has harvested that. They have made sure that we feel comfortable with that, and then of course they sell us that. So they insinuate things like, there is a difference. That's one of the Snap-on taglines. So something that says, you know, the lineman. Well, everybody makes a lineman plier. This is the lineman, and it's made by Snap-on. Yes, I love these. They are great, but is it the end-all of linemans? I don't know. It works. It's not the end as far as I can see, but it is a good plier. So what happens is Snap-on, it has no qualms about trying to just take that and run with it, and most of us feel like there is something to that. Same when we get into the bright colors. Same when we get into these nuances and we argue over the handle designs. There's obviously something here when Snap-on puts their name on it that makes us feel like we either need to defend it, you know, or criticize it. That's a win in Snap-on's branding strategy. So overall, 100 years into the Snap-on design, the Snap-on company, we feel some obligation to give reverence to the Snap-on name. Sometimes that's in coming up with reasons to hate it. Sometimes that's coming up with reasons to love it. But most of all, it's coming up with reasons to respect it. And with that, Doc out.